Thank you. To start our program, I'd like to bring up our Lancaster West Rotary President, Michael Giovannini. So Michael, come on up.
Thanks, Mark. Like Mark said, I'm Dr. Michael Giovannini. I'm the current president of Lancaster West Rotary, and I must say, I want to welcome everybody here today. This is the best turnout I've had at a meeting since I took over, so maybe we should do this more regularly. I do want to thank all of our guests for showing up today, those that came up the hill to be here, welcome. Just to explain a little bit what Rotary is, we are a worldwide organization. We are a service organization. Our club is about 75 members. We raise money throughout the year with different events. We have a golf tournament, we do an auction, and we also do a lobster dinner, which is coming up October 28th. We do that over at Jet Hawk Stadium. It's on a Sunday, so if you're interested in helping us out, you can buy tickets from me, and I can sell all my tickets today. That would be amazing. And after we get the money, we distribute it locally to schools, veterans groups, whatever the good causes that we can find, we get the money out there to people that need it. So that's pretty much what our club does. We are a very good, strong, healthy club. We have a great group of people that do a lot of service up in the Antelope Valley. So I applaud their efforts to keep us going. Right now I want to introduce Liz Diashan. She's going to take over from here. She is the president-elect for the Lancaster Chamber of Commerce. Liz?
Thank you. Thank you. So I do know that we have some Rotarians here, but I know that most of you are going to be buying tickets to every Lancaster Chamber of Commerce luncheon this year. So thank you for that. Mark will just set up the room for 200 on a usual day. So yes, I'm Liz Diachin. I'm the president-elect for the Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the executive director of marketing and public information for Antelope Valley College. It is our 89th birthday today. Go Marauders. So thank you for that. So we have a great event scheduled for today. So we're going to go ahead and get things started with Pastor Terry Van Hook from Lancaster United.
Thank you very much. Shall we stand for a prayer and invocation as well as for the Pledge of Allegiance afterward? We live in momentous and extremely changing times, and it's important that we come together in those deeper spiritual values. So I invite you to pray with me, with whatever your tradition may be, for this event, for our valley, for our nation. Please let us be in prayer. Almighty God, we do thank you for the blessings you have given us for life and liberty and love. We thank you for the food that was prepared here and all those who have brought it to our table. And we ask especially that you challenge us to live in those higher values that you have given us, that we continue to follow love, respect, and understanding in all our ways. In the power and strength of Christ, I pray. Amen.
And Miss Lancaster, Kimberly Bott.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Will you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, so for today's debate, we have Dr. Giovanni, who will be doing our timekeeping today. Thank you. And then our moderator for the debate is CEO of the Lancaster Chamber, Mr. Mark Hemstreet. Mark, in addition to being the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, he has had a long history in the hospitality industry. In addition to that, Mark has spent the last 29 years volunteering in the Antelope Valley. Over this time, Mr. Hemstreet has been actively involved in board levels of the YMCA, American Cancer Society, United Way, and currently holds positions with the AV Board of Trade, Lancaster West Rotary, and Boy Scouts of America. So with that, turn it over to Mr. Hemstreet.
Thank you, Liz. So I'm going to go ahead and sit at my little table down here. So up front with me, I have Mike with me, our president for Lancaster West Rotary, who has a little light bar, so that way we can keep our candidates on time and on track. So I'm going to have a seat. And just to let you know, just an overview, I'd like to thank Lancaster West Rotary for partnering with the Lancaster Chamber to bring you today's forum. I'd also like to thank our two candidates, Katie Hill and Congressman Steve Knight, for joining us today and providing with their insights on their positions that they take. The aim of the Lancaster Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Lancaster West Rotary is to inform our members and the general public where candidates stand on specific issues and what plans they have, if elected, to make our community a better place to live, work, and prosper. To be able to maintain our timetable and professional behavior, I ask our audience in advance, do not interrupt either candidate. If you approve of a candidate's statement, please hold off until they are finished to applaud. We will not be taking questions from the floor at this forum. There will be no outbursts, heckling, or other disturbances during the forum. Anyone disrupting the candidate or myself will be escorted out of the room. There will be no other recording or broadcasting of this event. And with that out of the way, please sit back and enjoy our congressional debate. And I'd like to ask our candidates, Katie Hill and Steve Knight, to please join me at the stage. And to make it fair and even, I'd like to ask Katie to pick heads or tails so we can see who starts off the debate. So, heads. And it is tails. Steve, do you wish to start, or do you want her to start the opening statements?
I'll finish.
So you want to have her start. Okay. So we will begin with our opening statement. Katie, you have 1 minute.
Well, wait, Mark,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm finishing the second, the closing. Is that right?
You'll start. If she starts the opening, you'll start the closing.
So let's switch that.
Okay, so you want to start the opening. Okay, Steve. Trying to keep tough here. Steve, you have 1 minute for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you all for coming here today. Thank you to the Chamber and West Rotary for putting this debate on. I think that this is very important to see what differences are and what similarities there are. I have my lovely wife in the audience, and she and I raised two boys, Christopher and Michael, right here in the AV. And we call the AV our home. We love this area. You know, it's interesting. I've stayed very positive in the 3.5 years I've been in Congress because I think that is the way that you get things done. And we've worked with the issues that we told you we would. We worked with our aerospace community. We worked with our veteran care, worked with small business. And we've achieved great wins on all of those fronts. But the only way we do that is working with the community, having a positive attitude, and working on things that we know we can achieve. So I look forward to the questions, I look forward to the debate, and I thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Steve. Katie, you have 1 minute.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much to the Lancaster Chamber of Commerce, to the Lancaster West Rotary, to Congressman Knight, and to all of you for being here. I also really want to commend the service work and the focus of that in this debate. That's what I grew up doing. I'm the daughter of a registered nurse, my mom here in the audience, and I'm a police officer here in the Antelope Valley. I grew up in Roseman, went to Roseman Elementary School, and I dedicated my life to serving our communities. I was the executive director of PATH, People Assisting the Homeless, which is the largest homeless services organization in California, helping thousands of individuals, veterans, and families move off the streets into permanent homes every single year. I love this community. This is my home, and I want to represent it in Washington because I believe we all know that the political system, as it is, isn't working, and that we can do better because we have to do better. I look forward to this debate, and I look forward to earning your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. So today's forum is going to be divided into 4 segments, approximately 15 minutes each. They will be under America's education system, achieving prosperity, business and local economy, American wellness, healthcare, and live better, our local community. So with that, each candidate will have a 2-minute response time, and we'll start with Steve with the first one under America's education system. School shootings have dominated the news, even reaching into our own community. What action should the federal government take in making schools safe for all children, and who should foot the bill? You have 2 minutes.
So there's nothing more important than when you drop your child off at school to make sure that they're safe, and that when you pick them up that afternoon, that they've had a good day, but more importantly than that, that everyone around them knows that the safety of the child is the most important thing. I was part of our children growing up and part of our board out on the west side to kind of manage and make sure that when the children were dropped off, the children were in a safe environment and that they were in an environment where they could learn. Now, recently, we've had an awful lot of shootings that have dominated the news, and there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt that there's nothing more tragic than watching something on the news or hearing that a school has been locked down because there is a shooter there. So we've had several roundtables. We first brought the law enforcement community in because there was an awful lot of issues going around in the news, and people were saying this and people were saying that. So I thought, let's get the law enforcement community, let's talk to them about really what works at a school and what doesn't work at a school. And it was interesting to see that everyone agreed that more training has got to be kind of one of the number one issues. We saw a shooting where an officer didn't perform like he should have, and then the very next couple weeks we saw an officer perform admirably in a very similar situation. So we wanted to make sure that there is training. So I created a bill called the STEP Act, and it puts into training for our officers that are on campus, our deputies, and it also talks to the teachers and to the administrators to know what happens when a dangerous situation is happening. So when you have an active shooter that comes onto the school campus, it's much different than a fire drill, although all of us grew up with a fire drill. So part of my STEP Act is to make sure that we put money into school safety that would harden our doors, make sure that the teachers have a button there to lock the doors down if something like this happens.
Thank you, Steve. Katie, same question.
Yes. Well, this weekend I had the ability to spend some time with my nieces, who are 7, 5, and 2. And the 5-year-old was talking about the fire drills and the school safety drills that she had because of active shooter training. And when a 5-year-old is talking about that, we know that something is fundamentally wrong with our society. It's also, today is National Suicide Prevention Day, and 2 years ago today, I lost a dear friend to suicide by gun. So we have to talk about the prevention of gun deaths across the board, not just in relation to school shootings. I fundamentally believe that I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I own guns as the daughter of law enforcement. This is something that has a long tradition within my family, but I think we need to have sensible gun regulations that are in place to make sure that we're not allowing guns to get into the hands of people who shouldn't have them, whether they're domestic abusers or people on the no-fly list. And I think that this is an area where we have seen over and over again when the vast majority of Americans believe that we need to have sensible gun regulations, especially universal background checks, but we can't get that passed through Congress. That's a failure on the part of our leadership. And this is an example where we need to do better. And that's one of the reasons that I have not and never will take money from the gun lobby, unlike Congressman Knight, and I look forward to working on this issue in Congress.
Thank you. And now we switch the questions, so Katie, you will have the next question, and that is, given the bankruptcy and closure of ITT Tech and Corinthian colleges, what is your position on federal subsidies, student financial aid support, and veterans benefits to for-profit charter schools and colleges? Katie.
Sure. I'm the product of public schools, including public college education, and my family made it into the middle class because of the GI Bill. My grandfather was got out of poverty by joining the Army, got the GI Bill, ultimately became a UCLA professor. And the other one joined the military to get a scholarship and became somebody who worked on the space shuttle in the Apollo series. So education and trade education, college education is what lifts people up and allows us to expand and build on the middle class. So opportunities have to be available at every level. And what we've seen are the loosening of restrictions on these for-profit institutions to take advantage of people, particularly veterans and low-income folks, who are looking for an opportunity to move up and instead are taken advantage of. So at the federal level, I believe we need to have mechanisms in place that are going to evaluate whether a school is performing what it should be doing and whether it's giving the appropriate value to its students. At the end of the day, the most important thing is ensuring that the people who have served our country, the people who are trying to work within the middle class, who are trying to do good for our community, have the opportunity to thrive and to get the best education possible without being taken advantage of.
Thank you. Steve, this question goes for you to start. Since the inception of IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Act, the federal government has never fully funded its share of the financial responsibility created by the legislation. Every school in this congressional district, and undoubtedly throughout the country, must take money from its general fund to pay for services legislated by the federal government without funding. What is your legislative plan to address this issue and fully fund the federal obligations to special education?
Yeah, so we know at schools it's the biggest budget item here in the state of California. We spend about 60% on the money that is brought into California to our public school education. And we also know that money comes from the federal level. I've always been an advocate that money needs to go down to the education system as quickly as possible with as little hands touching it as possible so that we have more money at the school level. So we worked with the school districts and we've talked to the school districts about what they need. And when we talk about children with special needs, we understand that sometimes the school districts have to spend more money on certain areas than they do on other areas. So we have to make sure that the money goes down and is flexible for the school districts to do what they need to do in that certain school district. Remember, a school district here in the Antelope Valley might be different than a school district in La Jolla or Sacramento or Omaha. So we need to make sure that the flexibility is there for those school districts to work on the issues that they see fit for that certain body of students. But we also want to make sure that we fully fund. When we're talking about children that have either a special need or they have other issues that the school district has to address, that does take money. And we've always advocated that the money has got to go right down to the school district, and we've got to make sure that it is fully funded. So we've always been an advocate of that.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to let Katie go ahead and answer that same question, and then I apologize, I erred. I didn't let Steve talk about my previous question that Katie answered. So, Katie, I'll read the question once more. We'll let you finish this one, then we'll go back a step.
Sure.
So I apologize. Since the inception of IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Act, the federal government has never fully funded its share of the financial responsibility created by the legislation. Every school district in this congressional district, and undoubtedly throughout the country, must take money from its general fund to pay for services legislated by the federal government without funding. What is your legislative plan to address this issue and fully fund the federal obligations to special education?
Great. First of all, I am somebody who has many members of my family with special needs, and that's an issue that I hear about over and over again within our community, or people whose kids are dependent on these services to be able to thrive within their schools and within our community. What we've seen over and over again from the federal government is unfunded mandates. And as somebody who was an employer and who had to implement unfunded mandates, I know that the burden that can place on local employers as well as local school districts. But what we're missing is the federal funding for those resources. We have to ensure that we're able to invest in our kids at the federal level, and for something like this, fully funding special education has to be a priority of ours, which makes it particularly difficult when at this point, the Republican tax plan that was passed a little less than a year ago is taking massive tax deductions for the biggest corporations in our country, and 80% of the benefits are going to the wealthiest people in our country. That makes it very difficult when you've got a $1.5 trillion deficit that's projected over the next 10 years because of the tax plan to invest in our schools. So we have to make sure that the revenue is there and are investing it in the places where it needs it, as opposed to in the hands of people who simply don't need that kind of a tax break.
Great, thank you. And once again, Steve, I apologize for not letting you answer my previous question. So we'll go back a question. Okay. So I'll read it again for you. Given the bankruptcy and closure of ITT Tech and Corinthian colleges, what is your position on federal subsidies, student financial aid support, and veterans benefits to for-profit charter schools and colleges?
So education, especially since we're here in Lancaster and we're in the Antelope Valley, has always been one of those issues where we're trying to get more education opportunities here. We have a lot today. Here in the Antelope Valley, we have our Antelope Valley College, which is having its birthday today. We have a private university, University of Antelope Valley, that provides 4-year coverage here for many different curriculum. We also have the connection to CSUB and to Long Beach here, along with many of the other private institutions that are here in the Antelope Valley. Now, maybe 20 years ago, we couldn't have said that. We couldn't have said that was going to be the fact. So if we're going to do that, we've got to make sure that the federal government comes into play on this. Now, I'm a survivor of FAFSA. I've done FAFSA many times for my children, and that is the program where you go in and you apply for this loan for your kids to go to college. And it is the most onerous program you've ever seen in your life. So we've kind of taken that apart and we've said, look, we want families to be able to get a loan at the federal level, be able to send their kids to school, but not have to have a physics degree to pass the FAFSA test. So what we're trying to do now is say that if your kid wants to go to college, we want to help you at the federal level. Now, I think that what we should do is bring down a very low interest loan and cap that loan and allow people to apply for that loan to go to college of their choice. What is happening today is much different than that. Some people apply for FAFSA and they qualify. Some people don't. Some people get another extension of FAFSA that others don't. Just say that if you want to go to college and you want to take that loan on, that federal loan, we will cap that at a very low interest rate and you can go to college. And I think we can do that, and that will work out way better than the system is today.
Thank you. Moving on to our second part, achieving prosperity, business and the local economy. So Katie, you will start on this question. Plant 42 is an important economic driver in this community. What plans do you have, if elected, to ensure the federal government continues their investment in Plant 42's mission?
Well, thank you. I'm very proud of the tradition of aerospace in this community. I grew up right next to Edwards Air Force Base. My dad was in the Air Force, and as I mentioned, my grandfather worked in aerospace, so it's multi-generational for me. We have to ensure that these investments are happening in our local economy, and that's a priority for me when I get to Congress. I know that this is something that Congressman Knight has advocated for, and I commend him for that. But we can see that continuing while also addressing the other priorities that are facing this community. I hear all the time about the concerns people have around healthcare, around wage stagnation, and around the fact that within aerospace, we have more and more people who are having to come in to fill these jobs from other communities because our own local residents are not qualified for and are not able to achieve to secure those jobs. So we've got to be investing in education to prepare our workforce for the future, to make sure that the employers who are coming here to work on the aerospace contracts are incentivized to hire locally, and to make sure that we're partnering with incredible institutions like Antelope Valley College. Further, we we have to make sure that we're supporting the workers in these investments as well. And that's why I'm proud to have the endorsement and support of the United Aerospace Workers Union, and it's something that I'll continue to prioritize if elected.
Great, thank you. This time I'll get it right. Steve, same question. Do you want me to repeat it?
No, I'm good,
Okay.
thank you. So we all know this is the Aerospace Valley. This is where the Wright brothers did something great in 1903, and then we took over. And that is basically what has happened for the last 115 years. This is where aerospace happens. Plant 42 is very near and dear to our heart because we know the testing that happens at Plant 42. We know that the community needs that. The Northrops and the Boeings and the Lockheeds need that facility to do what they need to do. But it also has to be up to date for the future projects. We also know that there are future projects that are coming, and they are big projects. So we have taken this to a very high priority. Plant 42's tower was having many problems. It was seismically had a problem, and it was wind restricted. Those are probably two things you don't want here. So we went and talked to Plant 42, and we talked to the Air Force, and we got a line into the National Defense Authorization Act to build a new tower out of Plant 42. Now, why that is so important is if we are wind restricted or if we have seismic activity out here and we cannot fly or they shut us down for a period of time, they will look outside of California to do testing. This is not like it was in 1950 when you had to be 28 miles from Edwards Air Force Base. We test all over the globe today. This is the best place. We have 360 flying days a year. Some say 350, they don't live here. 360 days of flying time here. We have the manpower and we have the brilliant people here. And then lastly, the connections to our universities. Antelope Valley College has started an AFAB center, which we were very supportive of, to get people right from here to work into our aerospace community. It is a short program, and they go in and get a high-paying job with great benefits. It is working very well here, but we always have to keep that at the forefront.
Thank you, Steve. For our next question, I'll let Steve go ahead and start this one off. With the improving economy, most American workers are seeing increases in wages. However, the president recently announced a pay freeze for federal workers. Do you support or oppose providing federal employees with pay increases in line with private sector pay?
Yeah, so we've come out, we oppose this. Just because the president says that I am your representative in Congress, we can say yes or no to whatever is happening. I'm sure that the representatives here at the state level have said yes or no to the governor in California. And we have said that that shouldn't be there. We shouldn't have that freeze. It is a small item that we can absorb into the budget that makes a world of difference to the people that are working in the different areas. We've also moved in a direction to make sure that when we're looking at the budget items, we're looking at something that is giving us a whole lot of return, not just saying, well, we paid for this last year, let's pay for it next year, and so on and so forth. And just a quick item on that, we did about 40 bills on opioids this last session. A couple of them looked into, if we give you money, we want a metrics to show what we are getting. So it doesn't mean that we give you $1 million and then the next year you get $1 million. It means you got $1 million from the federal grants. How many people did you cure? How many people went through the process? Where is the next step to that? So I think that we look at that always in the budget. But as we're looking at the raises for federal employees, they have had almost a standstill for many years, and over the last 8 years, they have been upside down. So I oppose this. I think that this should move forward.
Great, thank you, Steve. Katie, same question.
Great. So first of all, I think that we have to remember why this is even on the table and why we're talking about cuts or wage stagnation for federal employees. And it's because of the president's tax plan that was approved by Congress that gives billions of dollars in tax breaks to people who don't need it, and we're using this tiny line item on the budget of ensuring that middle-class workers, including so many here in our community, are paying the brunt of that. Their wages are on the line because of the tax cuts that we've given to foreign investors and to the wealthiest people in this country, and that's completely unacceptable. It's one thing to oppose it, but it's another thing to stand up and say that we're not going to accept that, we're not going to pass a tax plan that doesn't help middle-class Americans, and that we're going to continuously, loudly stand up to a president who thinks that middle-class workers are a fodder for paying for this kind of a tax plan.
Thank you. For our next question, Katie, you'll be able to start this one off. What do you believe is the number one thing we can do locally to grow and diversify our local economy?
Sure. Excuse me. First of all, my sister's a small business owner here in the 25th District, and we know that small businesses are the largest employer in the entire country. They account for the vast majority of the workforce. So what we really need to do is invest in small businesses and make sure that there's every opportunity for a small business owner to be successful, to expand its workforce, and to help grow the local economy overall. There are several different things that we can do at the federal level to make that easier. One is access to capital. It is incredibly difficult for small business owners to get the capital that they need to grow their businesses, to start their businesses. And we have opportunities at the federal level to invest there and to make sure that it is easier for capital to be achieved. The other thing that I hear over and over again from small business owners is the challenges that they face around healthcare and around providing healthcare for their employees. This is something that is incredibly expensive for employers. It's incredibly expensive for the individuals, and we all know that when you have a sick workforce that isn't getting healthcare, you're not able to grow your business, and you're not able to meet the revenue goals that you've set out. So addressing healthcare at the federal level has to be an important factor in this, and when people are spending hundreds of dollars a month and even more, thousands of dollars a month sometimes, in basic needs like healthcare, then they're not investing that into our economy. They're not spending that money here with local employers and with small businesses. So we have to address these from a holistic approach. It can't just be saying, well, I've passed legislation to help small businesses on X, Y, and Z. It has to address the entire economic indicators around prosperity for our communities, and that's something that I'll do in Congress.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, same question.
I agree. There should be more access to capital. Absolutely. That's why I just passed a bill and was signed by President Trump to move up the small business amount from $150 million to $175 million. That is more access to capital. That is more opportunities for our small businesses to go in and get a loan and expand their business, hire more people, get our young people into the workforce. I absolutely agree with that. We have been very, very vocal on this. I am the chairman of Workforce Development on the Small Business Committee, and we've taken a very active role. In fact, I told the chairman that we are going to be a thorn in his side because we're going to be moving so many pieces of legislation. He said, you run with it. So we have. We've got a Women's Business Center Improvement Act. We've got the Small Business Investment Opportunity Act signed into law. Accelerated Payments for Small Business Act of 2018 just passed in the NDAA. It means that our contractors that work with the DOD, all of our contractors that we know here that drive out to Edwards Air Force Base and fix an air conditioner, or they work on some sort of masonry, or just do something out there, we've put a bill into the NDAA that says they will be paid for within 15 days. Now, the reason we did that was because many of these small businesses would have to wait to get payment from the DOD, and sometimes it would take 2 or 3 years. For all the business owners out here, cash is everything. And if you don't have it and it's locked up, you can't keep moving your business. So we said 15 days is reasonable in the private sector, it should be reasonable in the public sector, and we've moved that forward. But understand, if you cannot get great jobs to a valley, and we've talked about that in the Antelope Valley for many, many years. We've talked about the manufacturing jobs, not just aerospace, but bringing jobs up here that make the 20+ an hour jobs, not just the $12 an hour jobs. That is our biggest key up here. I think the education issues that we've brought really help. And I think that everyone kind of pulling together and talking to businesses
Thank you,
helped.
Steve. I'm going to cut you off there. Sorry about that. Thank you. Moving into American wellness and our health care. Steve, I'll let you start this question. Do you support retaining the Affordable Care Act as is?
So I support getting a system in place that is accessible and affordable. And there's a couple things I'll say about this. I've never seen in Congress the movement that I've seen in the last maybe 3 or 4 months when it comes to an issue. The healthcare issue became a one-sided issue for a long time, and then it became another one-sided issue for a long time. This is the first time that Republicans and Democrats are really coming together and starting to talk about how we can do this in an affordable and accessible way. I don't like to just talk about these issues. I like to kind of bring something forward. So we did it on a one-group issue. And we brought forward a plan that is now here in the Antelope Valley. It's only in 2 districts in the country. It's here in the 25th and in Kevin McCarthy's district in Bakersfield. And it brings a convenience care for our veterans. It says that when a veteran calls to the triage nurse and the triage nurse finds out that they are covered by the VA and that they have an issue, if they cannot go to our CBOC, which is right here in Lancaster, or it's after hours, or it's on the weekend, they can go right to one of the urgent cares that is here in our valley that is taking care of us. I think this is one of the ways that I can show that you can talk about it and you can yell about one side, or you can say that this isn't working, or they did this, or they did that. Please tell me what you did. This is something we have absolutely done. And then the last thing I'll say is we have worked very, very hard on one of the big issues that I hear almost on a daily basis, and that is prescription medicines. If we cannot get a hold of prescription medicine, then it really draws down the healthcare system. So we passed a bill just 3 or 4 months ago called the Right to Try. And it means that people who are in serious condition have the right to try a drug that might not have gone through all the clinical situations. That is a new movement in trying to bring down these types of things.
Thank you, Steve. Katie, do you support retaining the Affordable Health Care Act as is?
Well, I'd like to start with a story about why healthcare is the #1 issue in my platform. And that's that right after the Affordable Care Act had passed, but had not yet taken effect in 2010, my husband, Kenny, and I were supposed to get married. And it was the day of my bridal shower. He had a short period without health insurance because he had a pre-existing condition as a kid. He had asthma as a kid. Couldn't afford the plans, the individual plans that were available, and wasn't yet covered by his new employer. So he had a gap in insurance, and he came back the day of my bridal shower and said he was having chest pain. And it turned out that his lung had 100% collapsed. He had to go into the emergency room, ended up being hospitalized for 11 days after emergency surgery, and we came out $200,000 in medical debt. And that story is so common for people in this community, and that's why we have to protect and expand the Affordable Care Act. The Republican Congress last year, including Steve Knight, voted to take away health insurance from millions of people, including over 60,000 people here in our own community, without a plan to replace it. That's the key, is that there was no plan to replace it. And because of the lack of stability in our health insurance markets that we've seen over the last several years, the insurers are raising prices over and over again, and they're putting that onto the backs of consumers and onto the employers that are paying for that health insurance. So right now we have projections that health insurance costs are going to go up by 30% for people in the next several months here in California, right here in California, 30%. That's thousands of dollars a year. And we have to do better than that. So taking the steps to stabilize our health insurance markets, to make sure that people are able to afford prescription drugs. I appreciate that Congressman Knight brought this up, but we've seen that he's voted many times to make it so that the federal government can't actually negotiate drug prices. When I hear over and over again from our seniors that this is the #1 issue that they're facing is the cost of prescription drugs. And the particular challenge with that is when you follow the money, when you look at campaign donations, the amount that he's gotten from pharmaceutical companies and those who support pharmaceutical companies has made it clear why he votes in that direction.
Thank you. Our next question, Katie will now be the first one to speak on the next question. Veterans often struggle to get basic medical care. What will you do to improve the access to care and the quality of service provided by the VA medical system?
Great. Well, I had the opportunity to work on veterans issues a great deal in my past life with PATH. In fact, I was the one who helped to oversee the opening of our Palmdale office here, which worked with, over the past several years, hundreds of veterans who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And one of the top issues that they faced was access to health care, considering that the VA is so far away and that the services that are available at the CBOC here in the Antelope Valley are not always enough. So we have to invest in our veterans. There's no doubt about that. And that means making sure that they have access to adequate health care, including mental health and substance abuse services. Those are critical issues that our veterans face and that we have to be investing in. And it's not enough to pay lip service to it. We have to make sure that we're putting those investments in place, that they're coming to places like the Antelope Valley that are far away from medical centers, that we're investing in innovation and in technologies that are going to make it more accessible for our veterans to get care remotely or through telecare. And again, continuing to see that investment. For us to be able to pay for that, we can't have tax cuts for foreign investors and for trillionaires. We have to be able to pay for it through our budget, and we cannot afford to put potential cuts to veterans programs on the line because of these kinds of tax cuts.
Great. Thank you. Steve, same question.
So we've made it very clear that one of our top priorities is our veterans' care. Not just when they're in the military, but when they leave the military, and to make sure that they get the proper care and the proper care that they deserve. So we've started with a lot of pieces of legislation. I talked to you about the urgent care. One of our first bills was the No Hero Left Untreated, and we are still working with that. We're still trying to get a Democrat co-sponsor in the Senate level, even though we have a lot of people that say, boy, this would work. They just won't come forward to help us out. But the No Hero Left Untreated would be a process that is non-invasive to help our veterans that are going through PTS and TBI, and maybe even talk to our police officers and firefighters that are going through similar situations. Non-invasive works. We've done it with 500 different special ops veterans. 61% of them said it changed their way. 98% said it had an effect on them. I don't know where you're going to get those types of numbers. We've talked about the convenience care. We've talked about our Encouraging Veteran Employment Act of saying, hey, we encourage you to hire veterans. And when you do, at the federal level, we'll be looking into tax credits for you instead of just looking at veteran-owned businesses. We've authorized money to work with veterans that are going through these opioid problems and their addictions. So we've really kind of moved in a process of making sure that our veterans are taken care of. But let's go back to something on this tax cut. Let's understand that today we have more people looking for work. We have more jobs than we have the people to fill them. First time in about 40 years that's happened. This tax cut is also bringing up our economy. 4.2% last quarter. Those are big numbers. We have a booming economy. People know that, and our veterans know that. And if veterans have jobs, a lot of things get better. If they don't and they're looking for jobs, that is a huge problem.
Thank you. Our next question, Steve will be able to start the next question, and that is, and I'll make a comment after my question, but the Antelope Valley has a shortage of mental health providers. Should the federal government offer incentives for nonprofits, for public and or private mental health service providers to expand into underserved areas? And my one little quick comment is that we do have a question on homelessness, so let's make this more just on mental health issues. Steve, go ahead.
So absolutely, we've dealt with the providers in mental health, and we have found out that even over the hill in Sepulveda and West LA, it is very low amount of people that are clinicians that can help our veterans. So we have talked to the people that are involved in this, and we've looked at the federal government and said, why can't we put an incentive in place, just like you're saying, to hire people and get them into place? The biggest problem we're seeing right now is a lot of them aren't going through the education system and graduating with the degrees that we need. So we have to find these people and we have to bring them in. If you're a qualified clinician, and we're talking about psychologists and psychiatrists and clinicians in many different curriculum, we need to bring those in instead of saying, well, let's put more in and hopefully in 8 years we're going to have these folks that will take over. We've got veterans today that need the care right now. We've got veterans that talk to our office almost on a daily basis that say they go over the hill and they're not getting the care that they should be getting. So I am in full support of making sure that we get more clinicians in there, but the way I would do it is either dealing with our education systems and trying to get them in their kind of their senior phase, or getting already qualified clinicians that can come over and work for the VA. That means we're going to have to pay them too, and there's a cost involved, and you've got to have some parity there and some level playing field. But right now we are woefully short, and veterans here in the Antelope Valley and veterans across the country are not getting the care when it comes to mental health that they should. And then the last thing I'll say is here in the state of California, we passed Proposition 63. This was about, probably 8 or 10 years ago for mental health. Put that money into mental health. When I was in the legislature, I voted 4 times against the budget, where the Democrats had taken money out of Prop 63 to balance the budget. Don't take the money out, especially when people have voted for it, and it needs to be there.
Thank you. And I'll read the question one more time, but this is for Katie. The Antelope Valley has a shortage of mental health providers. Should the federal government offer incentives for nonprofit, public, and/or private mental health service providers to expand into underserved areas?
Yes. So, first of all, the short answer is yes, we absolutely need the federal government to be investing in this regard. I was an employer of said mental health professionals. While I was at PATH, we employed over 400 people, about half of which were clinicians. And one of the biggest challenges we faced as an employer was a shortage of workers. It was a shortage of people who had the degrees that were necessary, whether it was a master's in social work or a licensed clinical social worker or psychology and psychiatry. All of those are huge shortages that are facing our community across the region, not just here in the Antelope Valley. So we have to invest in education programs that are going to incentivize people to go into those fields of work. This is a long-term systemic problem that we have to address now, but we also have to address for the generations to come, especially when we found out that now 1 in every 4 teenagers is going to be diagnosed with a serious mental health condition, whether it's a severe anxiety or depressive disorder or something else by the time they graduate high school. So this is a long-term problem facing our community. We have to invest in our workforce to make sure that we're providing opportunities for people to enter these fields. That includes, federal grants and loans that can be forgiven. One of the challenges that has happened recently is that programs that do incentivize people to work in the nonprofit sector or work in public service, including in professions like this, have been gutted by this administration. So you used to be able to have 10-year payments towards your student loans that would be forgiven after serving in this kind of a capacity, working in the mental health profession or in social services, and those are gone now. Those incentives are completely gone, and that's something that it makes it even harder for someone to be willing to dedicate their career to what I would argue is one of the hardest professions that exists if they don't have any ability to even pay off their student loans. So funding it appropriately, making sure that we have incentives to bring mental health providers out here into the Antelope Valley, out here into any underserved community, but we're also preparing the workforce for the future.
Thank you. We're doing excellent on time, so thank you both for that. Our next section we're moving into is Live Better, and that's talking about our local community. So Katie, I'll address the first question to you. What should Congress do to reduce the homeless population nationally and in our district?
Well, as you know, this is my background. In almost a decade, I was working on the issue of homelessness, and that work really culminated in helping to get Measure H passed out here, which is something that is providing critical investments into the issue of homelessness here in Los Angeles County, and that our local elected officials are doing a great job of making sure that those resources are coming here as opposed to just being spent throughout other regions of Los Angeles County. So at the federal level, though, what we're seeing is a lack of investment, and we've seen programs like CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, that have been cut over and over again. We've even seen veterans programs be cut that are centered around homelessness. And that's because we don't have the revenues that are supporting it, because we're giving these huge tax breaks to the wealthy. One of the most immediate problems from the tax plan was that it basically devalued investments into low-income housing tax credits, which were one of the largest pools of resources for us to build affordable housing here in our communities. And if you don't have affordable housing, if you have high rents and low vacancy rates, then we see homelessness skyrocket. So we've got to see investments in affordable housing. We need to fully fund the Housing Trust Fund. We need to invest in mental health and substance abuse services, as those are critically involved in homelessness as well. And we have to address the growing wage gap. I have seen so many people who are working full-time jobs and sometimes multiple jobs, but still can't afford the rent and are becoming homeless because of that. The organization that I'm on the board of, Family Promise in Santa Clarita, sees families that are working full-time that are living in their cars. And so we have to do everything we can to lift up wages from the bottom and make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to support their families if they're working a full-time job.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, I'll read the question again. What should Congress do to reduce the homeless population nationally and in our district?
Well, a couple things right off the bat. I agree with Katie on CDBG funds. We so agreed that we put $100 million more into CDBG funds under my amendment than had previously been in. That brought the CDBG back up to its maximum level that we had seen for the last couple of years. So we fully believe that CDBG funds are very helpful for getting our folks off the street in homeless situations and to make sure that we are doing other things at the city level. But here's a couple things that we're doing here locally. And again, we're looking at the positive things that we can work on and we can continue to move forward. We've got the Kensington complex here with 156 individuals in Lancaster. The Colony Project, 161 individuals in Palmdale. A veteran project that is now moving through the process that will have 57 families right here get their new home. So we are working on the homeless situation. We also know that the homeless population and the homeless situation right here in the Antelope Valley might be different than other places in the country. It's very harsh here. 2 years ago, our high was 114 degrees and our low was 6. That's a very low for the Antelope Valley. I think we'd all agree. But these are levels of temperature that we don't want our folks to be outside, and we want to make sure that we can move them either into shelter or get them into a house. Now, the best way to do that is have a booming economy and have jobs available. If you have so many jobs that you have a problem getting the people into jobs, well, then you have 2018, because that's where we are. We need to have more training situations like the AFAB Center. I've already been talking to the automotive dealerships out here to do one for like an ASE technical group. So we need to make sure that we move these people that can work into a place where they do get a job.
Thank you. For our second question, Steve, I'll let you go ahead and start this one off. The recent tax overhaul eliminated deductions for equipment and supplies purchased by teachers and first responders to carry out their work. Would you support restoring tax deductions for our teachers and first responders?
Yeah, so I've talked to Chairman Brady in Texas. He's the chairman of Ways and Means, and we've talked about Taxes 2.0 that is coming at us right now, and then also Taxes 3.0 that's coming behind us. And we've brought forward the teachers and how they come forward and they put a lot of money into their classrooms, and now this is not something that they can be able to write off. We've also talked to the law enforcement community and to the firefighting community. So we know that there are some issues with the tax plan, and this is one of the issues that I think that we will be able to fix. But the second thing is many of them that we talked to, when they looked at it and they said doubling of the overall gets them to where they need to be instead of having to write off everything. So the standard deduction makes it much better for them. Now, not everyone gets to be able to do this, but I think in Taxes 2.0 we'll be able to accomplish some of those issues. But remember, when you're doing a tax plan and you're trying to make sure that your economy is moving in a positive direction, and when we started this, it was for low and middle income. And just a report in this last week from the Washington Post said this tax plan actually does work for the middle class more than anyone else that we have seen. So the problems I'm seeing or might be a little bit different than problems that other people are seeing, but I talk to a lot of people that have a problem with the tax plan, and I said we're working forward in Taxes 2.0 to try and resolve some of those. But the last thing we wanted to do was keep a tax situation like we had that was so convoluted and so confusing, and everyone was trying to put in their loophole and do this and do that. We wanted to kind of streamline this and get it to a process where we could have a booming economy, which is what we have, and so that people get through their taxes a little easier.
Thank you. Katie, the recent tax overhaul limited deductions for equipment and supply purchases made by teachers and first responders to carry out their work. Would you support restoring tax deductions for our teachers and first responders?
So again, this comes back to the fundamental underlying principles of the tax overhaul. And the fact that it was pushed through in a very short period of time without finding these kinds of problems in it shows you what's broken about our system. And it shows you that the Republicans in Congress were so desperate to try and make something happen that they didn't catch things like making sure that our teachers had the resources that they needed to be able to provide for our students. So first of all, we have to restore that, but we also should look at what happened to Californians overall with this tax plan. When it got rid of the state and local tax deduction, that makes up 60% of all tax deductions that were taken by people in this district. And that hurt people far, far more than anything else. So the deductions the tax benefits that people have seen maybe amount to a few $100s a year. But when you look at the lack of tax cuts that they're able to take, those do not balance each other out. And so we're seeing people have to pay more and more in taxes. And we must be talking to different people, because over and over again, I hear that it's harder to deal with the tax code now with the level of uncertainty that exists. And people are very frustrated that 80% of the benefits from this tax plan that are putting us in a $1.5 trillion deficit over the next 10 years are being afforded to the wealthiest 1% of people in this country and to foreign investors and huge corporations. That's not a tax plan that truly benefits the middle class, and what we need to work towards is a tax plan that does.
Thank you, Katie. And then we'll let you answer the next question. If elected, what committees would you want to serve on and why?
Well, if elected, first of all, we've had a tradition of someone serving in armed services here from this community for a very long time, and that's something that I would seek to do as well. I believe that it's such a critical part of our economy here, and that we need to have someone who understands that aspect of our economy and that is going to make sure that the investments are continue to be made and that's advocating from right here on armed services. So I'd like to continue that. The other committees that I think are high priority are transportation and infrastructure. I'm somebody who's had to make the 1 hour and 45-minute commute every single day to Los Angeles, like so many people here in the Antelope Valley, and that's not acceptable. We've got to be investing in our infrastructure. We've got to be investing in public transportation and in our roads, and failure to do so at the federal level for generations at this point is making it harder and harder for families to not only get by, but to spend time with their families after a 2-hour commute each way. So I would like to work on transportation and infrastructure as well. And over the long term, as seniority is gained, I want to work on energy and commerce to make sure that we're getting the health care we deserve.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, what committees would you want to serve on and why?
So it's interesting, the discussion that we've had today. We've talked about veterans, we've talked about the military, we've talked about small business. That's exactly what I'm on. I'm on armed services, I'm on small business, I'm a chairman of a small business subcommittee, and I'm also on science, space, and technology. I'm one of the very few people in the House of Representatives to sit on 3 committees. In that, I have 7 subcommittees that I go through. So we have taken it a very, very serious issue of what's going to affect the Antelope Valley, Santa Clarita, and Simi Valley, and how can we affect them. We've got to be on those committees. But that doesn't mean you can't work on the other issues too. I love that Katie brought up transportation and infrastructure. We just worked with the Department of Transportation over the last year plus, and over this last month we got a $47 million grant to work on the choke point of the 5 freeway that goes north from the cutoff to the 14. So these are the kinds of things that you can work on. You don't have to be on the committee. You don't have to be on transportation and infrastructure to get something done. You just absolutely have to work on the issue, and that's what we've done. Now, in small business, I've kind of enumerated what we've done, and on armed services, I've enumerated what we've done there. But it's also the totality of how we do it. 90% of my bills are worked with Republicans and Democrats. They're not a Republican bill that we just kind of force through there and hope that we get enough Republican votes to pass a bill. We get everyone to look at the issue, including Republicans here in California, Democrats here in California, and across the country, to move on an issue that we can all get something out of. I think that that is the best way to get something done, instead of just saying, I'm this and you're that, and I'm working this way and you're working that way. And we've shown it in our record.
Thank you. Steve, we'll throw the one back at you for the next question. Both Democrats and Republicans have threatened a government shutdown when working to pass a budget. Do you have a single budget issue you would hold out on?
I don't think that shutting down the government's the right thing to do. I really don't. You elect us to go and vote on your behalf as your representative in the House of Representatives. If you don't do that, then I don't know why you're there. We just had a bill that came up on the floor, and 132 people pressed the yellow button, which is the present button. I have no idea why they're in Congress. I have no idea why they're there. If they're not going to take a hard vote or an easy vote and press the green or press the red and lead. So I don't see anything that would stop me from continuing government, continuing the process of making sure that people are paid, making sure that our military is moving in the right direction, making sure that all the services are taken care of. But I do understand that when we go into these budget negotiations, there are certain people, and I would say that on both sides, that are very stringent, and they say, look, I'm not giving, you're not giving, and we're just going to go down this road. That is not me. I have my morals and I have my ethics, but I also know that I am there to make sure that we get something done. Getting something done means that a government is funded, make sure that we have a budget, and make sure that we can work on the issues that need the money to make sure that we move forward every year. So there's not something that I'm looking at that I'm going, boy, I'm holding out for that, or I'm not getting this, you're not getting my vote. But we do work on our issues to make sure that we get the absolute best budget and the best, if it's a CR or an omnibus, that we can to make sure that we're doing the best for our community.
Great, thank you. Katie, do you want me to repeat the question?
No, it's okay.
Nope? Okay.
Completely believe that if people are sent to Congress, then we should never play with our federal employees' wages, which is exactly what happens with a government shutdown, or make it so that federal contractors can't get paid. And as somebody who was working on that side, that was a federal contractor, we knew that every time that a government shutdown came into play or was on the table, that meant that we could be at risk of not being able to pay our workers because we wouldn't get paid through our VA grants or through our other federal grants. So this is a huge issue, and the fact that we've seen the inability of Congress to pass an effective budget and an actual budget on time is exactly what's wrong with our system. We need people who are going to stand up for that. We need people who recognize the importance of working across the aisle to ensure that we have the best possible budget to move forward on the issues that we need to, but that's also balanced and that also doesn't add to the national deficit. So the fact that we have, again, put this in jeopardy is a huge problem for me. And it's something that I won't stand for in Congress.
Thank you, Katie. Our last question before we close. Immigration is a major concern in California. How should Congress balance the protection of our national border versus the need for a growing global economy?
Great question. Immigration is an issue that we've talked about for decades and that we've failed to make progress on, and that's unacceptable. We know for a fact that we need to have secure borders. There's really no argument around that. But we can have an immigration policy that is both tough and smart, that ensures that we're focused on keeping dangerous criminals out of our country, but that we're also making it possible for people who have been living here and working here for years to do so legally and to make sure that they've got the supports necessary to be part of the system as opposed to working on the fringes of it. So working towards comprehensive immigration reform is a huge priority for me, but also making sure that we're doing everything that we can to stop illegal drug trafficking, to stop sex trafficking, and investing our resources in those areas around in immigration enforcement as opposed to something like separating families.
Thank you. Steve, immigration is a major concern in California. How should Congress balance the protection of our national border versus the need for a growing global economy?
So it's not really a balance. It's that we've actually got to work on immigration. We've had several groups get together and talk about immigration. We've talked about the border. We've talked about security. We've talked about DACA and TPS and many other groups and how we can kind of move forward in something that will work for our economy, work for our community, but also make sure that we are being fair. Now, I've married a beautiful woman from South America who came here from Chile, and she came here legally, and we went through the whole process. And I can tell you, honestly, the process of legal immigration is a big pain. It really is. The process of somebody being brought here as a child when they were 2 or 1 and they don't know any other country, and now they're 18 or 19 and they want to go to college and they want to work here in the country that they grew up in is a mammoth issue. And it's something that we should work on. So I was one of the Republicans that signed a discharge petition to say that we need an immigration bill on the floor. Now that was against my party, that was against my leadership, but I feel that if we don't do this, and we're talking about this in 10 or 20 years, we have completely failed our children. So let's get an immigration issue that we can all get behind, or at least the majority of us can get behind, and I think it revolves around 2 issues. One is border security. We absolutely have to have a strong border. The amount of drugs that come over our border, the amount of crime that comes over our border, and the amount of sex trafficking that happens at our border and comes into the states is unbelievable. So we absolutely have to have a strong border. And the second thing I'll say to that, if you don't believe that, and we had a terrorist action that came over the border, then everybody would say, boy, we need border security. So let's just agree we need border security, and then I think we can look at the DACA population and have the DACA population be able to stay here in the United States, and we can put certain provisions that they have to go through to be able to stay here legally. But we've got to work on this, and both sides are kind of working it back and forth.
Good. Thank you, Steve. And I applaud everyone in this room and our 2 candidates for allowing us to stay on time today. And because we had such a good, well-balanced and wonderful time, I'm going to give you guys a bonus here. The closing statement was 1 minute. I'm going to double that and give you 2 minutes. The nice guy that I am with the Lancaster Chamber, and Mike with Rotary. So there. So Katie, for closing statement, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss these issues. We're talking about an election in November that is really about the stakes of our country as a whole. We know that for too long we've had politicians in Washington who are accountable to their party, to the huge corporations that are funding their campaigns, and to lobbyists rather than to the people of our communities. And that has to change. We know that over and over again we're seeing failures on the part of our leaders to address fundamental investments in education, fundamental investments in healthcare and in housing, and in making sure that people have the resources they need to succeed within our communities. It's not enough to say that you're going to work on these issues. We have to have people who are going to stand up to party leadership, who are not accountable to huge corporate donors, and who are going to always stand with this community. And this is the community that I love. I know the values that I grew up with as the daughter of a police officer and a nurse, and by dedicating my entire career to public service, that I'm ready to bring that to Washington to find real solutions to the issues that are facing us every single day. Thank you so much.
Steve, your closing comments.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. I think it's very important to see what differences are and what maybe some agreeing parts are that we can work together. So I was a police officer for 18 years. I worked the streets of Los Angeles Police Department in LA as a blue suiter. I am married to a NICU nurse who works right here in the Antelope Valley Hospital with the 1-pound babies. So we know this very well. We also raised 2 children out here. My 2 boys went to public education out here every year of their life, including as my oldest went on to college and graduated from Sacramento State. So we know this community very well, and we also know what happens here in this community. Now, I'm not a person that comes up here and says, boy, we got to work on that, we got to fix that, I'm going to fix everything, and just elect me, and everything's going to be great. It just doesn't work that way, and I think we all know that in life. But you do get what I say from me. I told you I would work on the aerospace community, the veteran community, the small business, and I would work with people as a whole here in the community. I told you I'd do that, and I bet you there's not one person in here that would say, boy, he didn't do that, because I told you what I would do, and I did it. Now, I'm going to continue to do that, but you've also seen a totality of how we work with the community. You don't get that $47 million grant by just sitting here and saying, boy, I hope I'm on transportation and infrastructure. You actually have to go out there and do it. You have to work with the people, and you have to show them why it is so needed. That means working with the city councils and the county and the state, and working with the federal government. So we have a long history and a long record of winning and getting things done for the community. And I think that that is very, very important. Achievements matter. And so I thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you all in a future venue.